we're going to talk about something that Yossi was talking about in the first panel, which I thought was excellent, which is about being disruptive or trying to disrupt an energy, an industry, for example. And he asked, so what is the next big industry that is being disrupted? And I think the energy business is definitely one of them. So today we're going to talk about the world's most ambitious solar project. Who has heard about Desertec? Raise your hands. Okay, that's quite a few. Who of you that know it actually believes in it? Okay, that's quite a few as well. And how many people of you that believe in it and know it would actually put their money on it? Okay, that's not a lot. And exactly that is the issue. And I think we'll have a lot of issues to talk about with the CEO of Munich Re, which is the world's largest reinsurer. It's an insurance group. Nikolaus von Bomhard, where are you? Come up on stage and let's talk about it. Well, it's great to have you here. Thanks very much for your time. The first thing when I was given this panel was I had the question, what does insurance have to do with renewable energy and solar energy?
Well, thank you, first of all, Patricia, for a very warm welcome, and I'm pleased to be here with DLD. It's not an obvious visitor, insurer or reinsurer. Well, what does insurance or reinsurance have to do with energy, renewable energy? As some of you may know that specifically reinsurance is very active in reinsuring against catastrophe risks. And therefore we have a core business here, and everything that changes with the global climate, of course, affects us immediately, and that, of course, then is a trace into energies and renewable energies. So we think something's going on in our climate. We have a global warming. We don't doubt that at all, and we have to do something about it, and renewable energy is one way to do it, and we bring a lot to the table when you discuss climate and renewable energies.
Of course, it's a vision still. We talk about Desertec, an industrial initiative. It's a 400 billion euros, $600 billion US vision. This is big. I wonder now, how do you actually go about getting people on board? How did the whole project start, and what was the actual vision?
Well, Desertec actually is an old concept. It was developed under the auspices of the Club of Rome, and then was driven further by the German aerospace research team. But it never really took off. A foundation was founded not too long ago, Desertec Foundation, and then in the context of a presentation of our company, in an interview in fact, we mentioned it, and since then it really took off. We then thought, well, if people listen to us so well when we talk about Desertec, then let's really push it. And why could we do it? Because as an insurer, reinsurer, you're not obviously and fully sort of in the energy business. We have, of course, as I said, with the catastrophe business, an inroads into that business, but we don't have an immediate advantage of changing the energy mix in the world. Therefore, people listen to us, and we were accepted as a coordinator in the project and as an ambassador, and pushing the initiative into a status now where you have a limited company fully occupied with pushing Desertec forward.
Let me be a bit provocative. You say, as an insurer, you kind of try to ascertain the risk of anything that humankind produces, makes, or where they develop. And I wonder, isn't the insurance business, or isn't this kind of project just too late being introduced, also considering the climate change already being upon us, also COP15 and what came out of it or didn't come out of it?
Well, I would agree it's very late. It's not too late because it's a very slow, it's a creeping process what happens to our climate right now, but it's very late. Therefore, since you mentioned COP15, this was a very disappointing event as we see it, because we missed a unique chance to get the world's nations around one topic and deciding or determining how they would like to go forward. It's not too late, however. So if we succeed in bundling up initiatives and ideas into projects like Desertec, which is a big one in fact, I think we have still a good chance to at least contain the consequences of global warming. And this is what Desertec is about. It's just one huge project, hopefully in the context of many more to come.
Well, you know, I think if you listen to a lot of people, they actually see that there might be a bit of a conflict of interest. They see this as a PR stunt. Green is green. I mean, even our own CEO, Jeff Immelt, said that about the ecological push, ecomagination. That means green is making money. How do you kind of balance the reality? Listen, this is maybe economically not viable yet. However, there is a business model behind it, and it's not just a PR stunt that just because we're being corporate, social, responsible company, and that is all. I mean, how do you actually balance this?
First of all, I would say that you always need economic interest to move things forward in our world. So
to motivate people to come on board.
If you have a philanthropic exercise alone, I doubt that it would really gain traction. So you need an economic interest. And what you as well need is, in political terms, support from the electorate, and by the end of all of it, of course, from politicians. So Desertec, since we did not, some of you don't know it apparently, maybe should make it just a short word on what Desertec is about, and then coming to the real challenge of the project, if you like. Desertec is about using the power of the sun in the deserts, and tech comes, of course, from technology. So what this project tries to achieve by combining the power of the sun in the desert zone of North Africa and into the Middle East by building a renewable energy source of a gigantic size, first of all, to deliver the energy to the countries where you place these solar plants, and two, using the excess energy produced then to, by 2050, deliver something like 15% of the total energy consumption in Europe.
I think this is very important to notice, that this project, even though mainly driven by European countries, is for the countries where the plant is actually going to be built. A lot of it is going to be for the North African countries, right? And only what is in excess will be then exported, right?
Yeah, this is very important to make that point, because sometimes it's sort of depreciated, the project, as a colonial or late colonial project, or colonism. It's not. It's first about helping the countries in the region and adding to the development of these countries, because in some of these countries the access to energy is a major challenge. Two, by doing that, you could, for example, also desalinate seawater, which is another challenge of these countries, water, access to clean, potable, drinkable water. And then only once you achieve that, the excess shall be exported and then contribute, of course, as a hard currency income source, if you like.
You just mentioned the colonialist kind of perception people might have of the project. It's an interesting one, because I would like to quote here the Royal Highness Prince Hassan bin Talal of Jordan, who also is a supporter actually of that project. And he said the partnerships that will be formed across the regions as a result of the Desertec project will open a new chapter in the relations between the people of the EU, West Asia, as well as North Africa. Now, that is very positive, and I think Morocco is also pro-Desertec. But then you have the Algerian minister there, I think foreign minister, and he's our energy minister, and he's actually very against it. He talks about exploitation. You come here, you earn our sun, and you kind of send it back to your own countries. It is not such a clear-cut issue, so companies might see this potential conflict also as a PR risk. What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a challenge to get all these interests sort of into a meaningful and fair balance. And as I said, you have economic interest involved, because you mentioned the big sum. As of today, we assume it's a 400 billion account that has to be settled to finance all of that. So where should the money come from? But the biggest challenge right now is the political challenge, to get so many nations around the table to agree on a grid, a power grid, to distribute the energy produced across the Mediterranean Sea to Europe or among the countries. And this, I think, is some way to go still for all of us. And you see the interests alone on the North African rim are different. Then you have the Middle East with different interests. You have Europe with different interests. You have different energy strategies in the different countries. Take France on the one side with a 96 or 92% nuclear power production. You have other countries that go rather for hydropower. To get all these interests aligned will be a major challenge for politicians. And then in their countries, they must sell, if you like, this idea as well to their electorate. And it can be easily abused, like apparently it happened in one case that you mentioned, that it is another project where foreign money comes into the money, takes all the gain, and moves out again. That is not the plan, and we have to make sure that we get this message clearly across. It's not this.
So with this kind of political challenge in the back, I mean, you are 12 companies right now believing in the project, putting money, time, effort into the project. How do you convince companies to come on board? I think the target can't be 12 companies, that's it, and that's it forever. It must be increased. What are the strong points right now to sell the project that despite everything, against all odds, you could actually make a buck eventually, even on the project, whilst being sustainable too?
I think one of the most important steps right now is putting it on a broader basis in terms of representation of different countries. Right now, it's too much of a German exercise. The 12 founding members of these limited companies are almost all German. There's one Spanish company, one Algerian company, there's one Swiss company, but most of them are big German companies. So the next round now, the immediate action of the limited company is to extend the group of 12 founding members to 20, and they will almost all be non-German now, to internationalize that setup. And then we will have a second, if you like, circle around this founding circle that will be probably something like 50 to 100 associated members. And here even more, one will have to internationalize the initiative. This is the, if you like, enterprise side of it. But in parallel and already starting is the political discussion. But here, the limited company, of course, does not have the lever they do need. So here's where politicians and politics must come in. We do know that the German government, Foreign Office specifically, is already active. And from my trips specifically to the Middle East, I do know that these governments are highly interested. Qatar, for example, expressed that very clearly, and since they think strategic, long-term, they know oil isn't there forever, we have the sun, and we have the financial means to do something, so they're very interested in investing.
Mm-hmm. In terms of trying to get the financial support, because at the end of the day, it's all about money in order to realize that vision. You have, you could term them competing formats or platforms with the same sort of format. You have Desertec, you have Masdar City, and you have the Mediterranean Solar Plan. Now, my first thought was, oh my God, these guys are competing against each other for the same course across the globe for international investors for their project. Wouldn't it make sense to kind of see where the commonalities were, first of all, put it together and try to kind of pool the roadshow, if to say, to just put it really bluntly, and get it all going more or less down the same road?
Well, I think that would take things probably a little bit too far. We have a problem already in getting interests aligned for then a relatively small Desertec, if you think so big. And I would also think that in our society, it is quite good if some of these projects do compete. And I can't imagine a mastermind masterminding the development of various projects of that size. So we have, for example, also CTEC now, which is a northern European activity in trying to build an energy grid for the wind power. It's a much smaller project, but I think it's a wonderful project as well. And I, deep in my mind, have no doubt that the money will be the issue after all. If you consider the investment portfolios of big energy firms, 400 billion stretched over time is not much.
400 billion stretched over time is not much. However, anybody who would like to invest in it, let's say Yossi Vardi, Mr. Borda comes to you and says, okay, when do I get a return on my equity? Okay, and how high will it be? Because at the end of the day, we need to have a financial motivation to believe into it. What can you say to them about the business model? When is it viable in a time where we just heard at the end of last week, we have the German government cutting subsidies for the solar energy industry, the photovoltaic industry?
Well, I think it would be certainly very helpful, and probably needed in the beginning to have some sort of a subsidy to incentivize investment. On the political side, which I said is the big challenge, not only in terms of internationalizing the project, but also in creating a framework, a financial framework that is safe enough to get investors involved, big investors as well. But by the end of the day, of course, I could imagine that all of us here in the room, as an individual, as companies or governments, will hopefully invest. And the Desertec initiative is about getting everything in place that in the latest, in 3 years from now, we have prospects on the table that make it possible to say, yes, I put my money down and then I will invest. It does not mean that people cannot invest already, as they do, but that should kick the investment to a level where we really march forward and change the world by this investment.
I have a question for the audience. What do you think the percentages of people that live less than 3,000 kilometers from a desert? Give me a number. Can't hear a number. Okay. What do you think the percentage of people is that lives less than 3,000 kilometers away from a desert? You know, where the sun always shines? 5%? Other percents? 17? 20? Okay. 16, 18? Oh, you're just waiting until I say yes. No. All wrong. The right answer is more than 90%, 90% of all the world's population lives closer or around 3,000 kilometers away from a desert. That means that actually energy needs from these people could be solved by putting in solar structures, solar technologies. Now, talking about exactly that, you know, the exploitation issue, what Algeria is talking about. A big issue is also developing countries, i.e. technology transfer. That's another way you're trying to also convince the individual governments to come on board and to stay on board.
Certainly, energy is a wonderful export product. And since sun is not limited in the deserts, they all, in theory, could produce well in excess of their local and national need. One of the challenges is, but we do not consider it a major challenge, is transport itself. And you mentioned the 3,000 kilometers. But we feel that with the today high voltage direct current technology, it is certainly possible, and the leakage is such that from an economic standpoint, it's still worthwhile. So 3,000 kilometers is something that you can bridge, and the idea of reaching 90% of the world's population with energy produced by the sun, of course, is a wonderful thing.
Okay. As we do not have that much time left with Nikolaus, I would definitely invite you, this is your show, to ask him any kind of questions you would like to in terms of Desertec or where he sees the future of energy business. Please. Can we have some microphones? No. You keep yours. You need to answer.
You're so
close. What is the business model for the developing countries who are going to host this? How are they going to make money with that?
Well, in the beginning, of course, if they do not have the financial means themselves, in the Middle East, probably some of the countries will easily be able to finance everything themselves. That will be very different in the North African region. It will depend. I could imagine that is a mixed financing, private money, most of it, but also government monies, be it from institutional money like European money. Don't forget the Mediterranean Union that is being built, that of course has a lot to say in that project. So it could be a mixture of sovereign government money and private money in these countries. But I would think it would be good if it was mostly private, could be public-private partnerships.
Okay, there's another question. Good, wonderful. That gentleman there and here as well.
The number, 90% of the world population, probably goes way beyond the Mediterranean. So what are the plans for India and China?
This is not part of Desertec in the narrower sense. And we should not forget that the technology that you see up here, which is the concentrated sour polar concept, which uses parabolic troughs to collect the power of the sun. Is the first part is a new technology. The end part is just steam turbine technology. It's an old technology, so technologically manageable. These plants do exist for more than 20 years. The oldest, if I'm not wrong, we find in California. The younger ones you find in Spain and in North Africa. I'm not aware yet if you find them in India and China, but I do know that the Chinese government is actively looking into it and want by 2020 5% of its energy produced out of renewable energies. They have the financial means, they have the deserts. India too, and since India is so strong in wind energy already, I don't see any reason why they should not flip over to the solar as well. But the Desert Tech project is only looking into that region that I mentioned, but it's easily replicated.
What do you think about the solar energy exploitation in Germany, where the sun rarely shines, and which already now, as I have learned, costs the consumer about 8 billion annually? Mind you said 500 billion is not a lot of money, but for the German consumer, 8 billion is quite a sum.
Yeah, right. That will certainly, it will hopefully not be just the Germans to finance it, and actually it should go well beyond Germany, as I said earlier on. The question is, to what extent will the government support investors by granting or securing certain prices one day, feed the energy into the grid? And we could imagine that in the beginning this will be necessary. It depends also on the price for the hydrogen carbon, of course, energy. The oil price plays a role there. But what we have, Patricia mentioned that the government in Germany right now cuts back the support for the photovoltaic energy, I think is a good step. And you should not endlessly grant money. How much will be on the shoulders of the German consumer one day, I don't know. That is a truly political decision. And I'm pretty sure that the fact that we have a free democracy here and the parties will do their job to find the right balance. And the fact that they cut the photovoltaic subsidy is for me a clear sign that politics works. So, but it will be somehow financed, but that's why COP15 is also so important, that we do share that burden and do not have one or two countries alone that always take some of that burden alone.
Is there any cooperation with the project Arena in Abu Dhabi, where the different scenarios of energies are discussed? You know the project Arena.
I don't know the project Arena myself. Is it but Mazda I do know, the Green City, but I don't know the project Arena. Is it a solar project as well? Yeah.
There's Helmut Spodig from Vienna. I'm over here. This may sound a little philosophical, but most of the disruptions we have heard about before came from small startup entrepreneurs and grew large. If you look at the history of the computer, it's been a PC that was a disruption and grew large. If you look at another innovation that failed, which was Iridium, the satellite system. So the question is, aren't you afraid that this is such a huge project that actually it's dangerous to derail at some point, and having taken all this money and all this focus of energy, that it's really a sort of wrong way to innovate?
Difficult to say. Certainly it's different from what you discuss here, because the disruptors here sometimes start in the famous garage and then expand and extend their activities. And here one could say, well, you start pretty big right from the start with a higher risk, therefore. But I think if we have enough private money involved, there are checks and balances all the time. Does that make sense? What do we need to really be successful? And as I said, the technology as such is not so new. So the risk of doing something where you all of a sudden find out, oops, it doesn't work, for example, because these mirrors that you see here, they scratch too easily for the for the sandstorms, what have you. All these things have been tested. Transport has been tested. So there is efficiency gains to be made, which will improve the economic account, if you like. But it's not that they start from scratch and don't have this high sort of pilot phase risk anymore. Still, however, if fossil energy is too cheap, too long. It will at least take longer until these technologies have a breakthrough. But I don't doubt so much that we have to wait long. We have seen some spikes in the oil price anyway, and if the demand grows and increases again, then the price per barrel of oil will be, in quotes, helpful and push these technologies. But you're right, of course there is a risk involved, but I would think, as I said earlier on, technological side and economic side is not as much a challenge as the political side.
It's an interesting point you make. The more costly oil becomes, you can see it on the stock market. You see all the solar stocks really going up. So the TechDAX, for example, which is totally full of these companies, is then most of the time on the upside. There was another question from the gentleman over here.
Yes, you're picking deserts which are in some countries highly political, unstable regions. How do you take in that fact in your calculation, in your risk calculation, and how do you plan to ensure the security of your huge installations?
Yeah, very important question. Also a question of the top public domain. And first of all, let me start from the diversification standpoint. Of course, it's better to further diversify energy sources. Did you have Eastern Europe alone? Did you have Libya alone, or whoever it was? Of course, it's not as good as having maybe 25 countries joining the energy-producing, let's say, group. The politically maybe most appealing part of Desertec is, what I now would positively respond to your question, is that across religions, across the economic development of these countries, you tie them, or try to tie them together with that project. Hopefully, that will contribute also to stabilization in terms of political, let's say, uncertainties. However, you're right in asking the question, there is a risk. You can diversify part of that risk by building several transportation lines that you never only depend on one very country. And by building a grid in these countries also, you take some of that risk out. But you're right, there is a risk left. But I'm hopeful that by negotiating and dealing with that project, these nations grow further together and it will stabilize the region to some extent.
We have another question over there from the gentleman, just here in front. The last question, I'm told.
Sven Kigas with Service Plan. How do you envisage the management of such a grid which is multinational? Are we going to have a new SECD?
Yeah, that is a good question. Also, I'm not sure yet what by the end of the day we will see, but there are agencies in the world already to some extent managing connections or grids or joint activities of that kind. And it will be probably by the end of the day some sort of agency that looks into it, because you have to, of course, discuss prices for using the transportation lines. We have an agency here in Germany for that. And you will have something of that kind as well, together with the private industry at the table, but it will be a political decision by the end of the day how exactly the grid or the connections will be run. And therefore, it is so important that you build a long-term certainty as to what politicians might do, because otherwise investors will not invest. They will not risk of having every 2-3 years a complete change in the strategy. But that again comes back to the first question. That stabilizes countries and regions, and the more they are dependent on that export, the more of a stabilizing factor Desertec can become.
Okay, and I think if I may leave that discussion with one more question to all of you, just to show you the power of the power behind this kind of project. Let me ask you one thing. How long do you think we need to get solar energy, the sun shining, to provide the entire human population for 1 year with energy? 1 year's worth of energy for the entire population takes how long? What's your main guess? 5 minutes. Very good. More realistic.
6 hours.
6 hours, right. Well done. Thank you very much for your participation. 6 hours it takes. Let this sink in, think about it, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. von Bomhard.